Those were the challenges of Parliament. And when you hear the contradicting statements from especially the people who are supposed to supervise the ministry, when you hear Engineer Hilary Onek and his permanent secretary, they never, even the production of the agreements before Parliament was a disagreement in the ministry. I had the opportunity to interact with some of the officers in the ministry, and there was a big quarrel whether the agreements should be produced to Parliament or they shouldn't. And this is a question. When the agreements were provided, the question was asked, are they still legitimate? These licenses, have they expired? Or are you bringing to us agreements that had expired and we're dealing with issues which, even if we discuss now, would be of no consequence? And by the way, let me tell you, the oil sector is a very complicated issue. It's not just an issue that you wake up tomorrow and they give you a PSA and you read it and understand it. I did specifically recommend when I was chairperson that we need a formal presentation, a guided tour, to enable members of Parliament to appreciate, so that when these issues are captured in law, you know what you are dealing with. But now the law is going to be brought before December, but the process of inducting the members of Parliament to understand exactly the issues they will be legislating has not been done. And these are areas of concern. When now the arbitration became an issue, everybody was making a statement in the press, and members of Parliament asked the Attorney General, what are the problems? These resolutions shouldn't have come up if the Attorney General complied. But the statements he made on the floor, he said over his dead body, he cannot provide agreements. Did Parliament appoint him? So, if the ministry knew that the agreements, actually, all of them have been provided before Parliament, why would the Attorney General make the type of statements that he made? These are the issues which made Parliament very suspicious, and they decided in an unusual manner. This is one of the few times I've seen Parliament move in unanimity. The surprise of Honorable General Moses Ali, who said it seems the two sides have merged. He didn't understand, because I have here a copy of the resolutions. Unfortunately, I did not have the opportunity to be in Chankwanzi. But when I was in Chankwanzi, I sent an email to my dear Secretary General to wonder, when you read these resolutions as passed by Parliament, there is nothing that is really... One, the most important thing was moratorium. In resolution number 1, a moratorium on executing oil contracts and transactions be put on hold until government brings the necessary legal framework. This is exactly what Commissioner Rubondo is saying. To us, we are saying that government is making very serious fundamental commitments, which will be very difficult to redeem if we enter into them without the necessary new legal framework. The second one, look at the land transactions. During the debate on the floor of Parliament, an honorable member from Bulisa, Honorable Birahwa Stephen, did raise an issue. He said, you people, do you know? When these people, the commissioners, discover oil, the next thing they do, they send the people with cows to occupy the land as an advance team. The next thing you hear, they have taken over the land in anticipation of the returns in way of either selling the land to government or earning fees because either the refinery or the oil wells are found on a specific land. We would have expected that immediately the first discovery was made, government should have initiated a planning system to ensure that these fraudulent land regimes that are taking place in those areas don't take place. But these are issues which are never addressed, and these are going to be serious contentious issues. Who owns land where? Actually, on the day we were debating, children of a primary school from Hoima were in the gallery, and they had been displaced. Their school and their parents and their families had been displaced from one of the land by one serious prominent person within this country. It was reported on the floor. These are issues which... What? The person. I think if you got a copy of the Hansard, if we got the copy of the Hansard, but Honorable Birahwa did raise these issues. To us who don't come from there, we get concerned and say government should wake up and put, if these issues are not dealt with, tomorrow they are going to be the source of conflict. And beginning an oil sector on the basis or a background of conflict is not in the interest of anybody at all. Finally, you people have been privy, either through the media or through the debates of parliament, to see, one, the good effort that has been put in by His Excellency the President. The President has done a lot at personal level. But for us, we said one thing, that the President is motto. The President is motto. He has written letters to say no transactions in the oil seas should be concluded without me. And you imagine what would happen if tomorrow we wake up and the President has not woken up? What people would do in the oil industry before anything is done in the absence of legal regime? To what extent should we run an industry on the goodwill of an individual? How sustainable is the goodwill of the individual? The President has the goodwill, but tomorrow he may fly out of the country and there is a vice president or an acting president who may vary. You know what happened in Kenya sometime when Mwai Kibaki was made when he was vice president. When Mwai flew out of the country, he shuffled the cabinet. These are things that can happen and they are real. We said, so running an industry, whereas it must be run by the good governance and the goodwill of His Excellency the President, but at the background, it must be governed by a legal regime. So that with or without the President, whoever comes in the foot of the President, there must be a law, and every transaction must be protected by an act of law. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to recognize that, like Commissioner Rubondo said, there have been very many active young men and women in the oil industry who have sacrificed their lives and who have indeed worked day and night to ensure that Uganda becomes what it is. But when you go to other countries, what they have done, one, the management has been so structured that the gains of the oil industry will benefit the entire population, those living now and those to come in the future. For instance, in Norway, they have done this. Oil is a resource that is going to be exhausted after some time, say it could be 30 years or so. What right do we have as Ugandans to use oil now and exhaust it, and we prevent it from the future users who would have also benefited from it? Did we put it there in the soil? We didn't. The people who would have exploited it 100 years ago didn't. Could be because of science, because of discovery, and because of other things. In the Norway, what they have done, and which is very interesting, and I wish Mr. Rubon and your team, because you have been there, it's something that we could think of copying. In Norway, first of all, in Norway, they don't have production sharing agreements. That's the first thing they did. In Norway, they use a tax regime. They give you an exploration area, you go and explore, you make a discovery. What you get out, government takes 70%, the explorer takes 30%. Period. There is nothing like you are going to capitalize your costs. That's upon you. So the onus of maintaining the cost as low as possible is the responsibility of the person making the exploration. That is something they have done. Secondly, on the investment of their money, they have said, they have created a fund in which they invest their money. And in their budget, they only put 10% of the incremental revenue. If you get $100 million and you invest it, and you get out as profit $10 million, in the budget, they only put 10% of the 10 million. So, in so doing, oil in Norway will never get exhausted. In Uganda, what are we doing? The debate and our resolutions were drastically mad because because of the corruption allegations. And to me, I knew we stood the risk of being diverted because of the two different issues. One, there is the oil industry, which must be regulated and run well. Then two, there was the criminal element of the allegations of corruption. And at the forefront of it all, I would see that if emphasis is put on the corruption allegations, it's likely to make it diversionary and make members of parliament as if they are witch hunting in videos. That was a risk. And already, people would want to exploit that. But when you look at the resolutions, when I did send an email to my Secretary General, I said, but if this investigation was done, and actually the people implicated didn't do what exactly has been said, they would emerge out of the investigation even stronger than what they are now. So, any prudent person would have taken these resolutions in good faith and said what exactly are they saying, that they need a law brought within 30 days. Let them have it. They need an ad hoc committee. We have it. They need us to step aside for how long? 3 months. What would be the problem somebody stepping aside 3 months to be out of office? Because stepping aside will not mean a resignation. This one would be different from the issue between Sam Kutesa and Nasasira and Rukutana, because those have been indicted before courts of law. But these ones would be asked to take leave. Actually, they would remain as prime ministers, but on leave. They would remain as ministers, but on leave. Because actually, the committee or parliament cannot condemn ministers before a finding has actually incriminated them. Because all this is basically information. So, I think this was discussed in Chankwanzi. Unfortunately, I had traveled out of the country. I wasn't there. And it's something that is going to bog us down. But my thought to these videos, they would have emerged stronger if they honored these resolutions, came out, got investigated, cleared. They would be twice stronger than what they would have been. First, as members of parliament, we want an oil sector that will be run without suspicion. Two, we want an oil sector which is not run on the background or goodwill of an individual. We need a specific regulatory framework which should be sustained even beyond our own generation. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Emmanuel Dombo. That was a very, very good discussion. This time you've done the needful. I think it was a thunderous clap. Thank you very much. Straight away, I think he has been very, very, very articulate. I won't attempt to say anything. Let's hear from Angela Zama, and then we open up the discussion. Angela, you have the floor. How many minutes?
3 minutes is a long time, actually.
Okay. 10. If you need more, just let me know.
Thank you. Long nights during the week. Good morning once again, and welcome to my own behalf and some of my colleagues from Kwawote who are here. I see Arthur Bijira. Thank you for coming to Stone, and my thanks to Commissioner Ernest Rubondo, with whom I'm sharing the podium on oil matters for the second time, I believe, and to Honorable Emmanuel Dombo for being part of the activism in Parliament. Now, our topic is what are the implications of the parliamentary resolutions? It's broad, and I will attempt to respond to this in the following ways. First of all, in the oil sector proper, there are many scenarios you can build out of what happened in Parliament. Um, but let's answer the question why what happened in Parliament happened when it did happen. Some of my reservations about the debate in Parliament don't come out because they didn't do as a service. Remember that I went to court in 2007 to try and force the Attorney General to make the oil agreements public. At the time, we argued that it was important for confidence in Uganda's public institutions that what Emmanuel Dombo was saying, that suspicion be abolished from the management of a key sector like oil. And our argument in 2007 was that open societies are safer societies, and it is from within that context now that I will attempt to place what these parliamentary resolutions mean to Uganda's oil sector and to Ugandan society in general. But let's begin at first of all, I have a lot of confidence in Uganda's technocrats who are managing this sector, particularly Commissioner Rubondo and his team. Over the last 4 years, my interaction with them has given me the feeling that these are competent professionals doing their best in applying their skills to this sector. So I will leave a lot of the questions that you have about the production sharing agreements, about corruption in the oil sector, to Commissioner Rubondo and to Emmanuel Dombo. What is underlying Uganda's current crisis, if you'd like, or crises, is basically a question of Uganda's social contract. Now, you may find this to be a very basic question, but in fact, we're not a very old country. We're a young country. We have been an experiment for the last 40 years. And at the core of it, we have not really answered what is the social contract, what do we expect out of our government successively, what is the identity of Ugandans as a citizen, and the broader state building question we have is where do you locate the social contract, and how is it expressed in the management of public institutions? Now, this is, in fact, what we have all been discussing. Where does the social contract lie? Now, the oil sector is developing at a confluence of very important events that will have a real impact on how Uganda answers the question, where does the social contract lie, and how is it evolving? These important political, social, and economic events in Uganda are tied directly to the way Parliament is behaving. But the big elephant in the room is, how will oil affect Uganda's political transition? In fact, it's just a question of political succession. It is true that Emmanuel Dombo and his colleagues, including people